Welcome, Friday afternoon it is, Golden Black Live, Kyle Charters, Stacy Clarity, and I guess I'll say who I am even though you can read that, Alan Karpick, goldenblack.com. Welcome to, like I said, it is always almost by definition a Friday afternoon. It's only 75 degrees out there. We always talk about weather in the first 2 minutes. We're talking football actually, not weather in the unbelievable weather that West Lafayette has had here the last few weeks. But Kyle and Stacy, obviously, before we get to our opening credits, we'll hit an opening salvo on Purdue football, and then obviously throughout the course of today's show, we'll obviously be hitting men's basketball with Larry Clisby in segment 2. But Kyle, looking ahead, you guys both have been at practice. Hard to make a lot of evaluations based on the fact that we haven't seen a lot of outside of guys warming up and stretching. But what have you learned here in the first bit?
It was pretty exciting yesterday. We got to see, about 5 to 10 minutes of actual scrimmage out there because they pushed up the timeline a little bit because apparently they had some kids who had to leave early for tests or whatever. So we got to see a little bit. It looked like offensively they might have been a little disjointed, which probably isn't all that surprising. But, yeah, I mean, it's hard for us to glean anything, I think, at this point. Perhaps we can after watching them in an actual, spring game. But what we hear is through the coach and from the sounds of what Danny Hope has to say, things are going well. But, there's a lot of questions, I think, on the team, and I'm not sure a lot of those are going to get answered until, the freshmen arrive in the fall.
Well, and Stacy, we've talked about, too, this spring, the ability to have, to make a lot of judgments and pronouncements about this team because of injuries and because of a lot of people that aren't practicing certainly is a big factor.
Absolutely. I mean, the depth chart is ever-changing, especially – like you had mentioned, injuries to some pretty key guys and suspensions to some key guys. You look at the linebacking core, you were missing Dwayne Beckford, and that's a huge deal, especially when they don't have depth at linebacker. So in the parts that we've been able to see, and like Kyle said, it's very sporadic, and we usually don't learn that much, but we've seen them in nickel at least quite a bit. And I would expect that to be the case, and maybe to start the season at least, and depending on if Beckford comes back or not, because not only the linebacking situation, but also because of the secondary. And we hear they have a lot of talent there. We've seen some of the talent, but some of it's young guys we haven't seen yet, like E.J. Johnson and Taylor Richards and Frankie Williams. And so we'll see how they kind of factor in too. But just in terms of the defense, a lot of people, when Tim Tibesar came in, are asking about the 3-4. I talked to Kawan Short yesterday after practice. They have not worked on any 3-4 defense yet. So they absolutely are focusing on the 4-3 and just the base defense and obviously some of that nickel and trying to get kind of the concepts down, I think, and just learning the new defense right now.
Well, even from that scrimmage, and I know Nermondo Harris wasn't out there practicing with the first unit, so that might.
Him and Josh came in late.
Yeah, him and Josh were both late, but he saw Max Charlot and E.J. Johnson, at least in a little bit we saw, were the two safeties that were out there. So perhaps a little bit of a hint as to where they're going at safety. They had Ricardo playing a sort of an inside cornerback, which we had heard might be a little bit of a possibility at times, though we were a bit skeptical. But he was out there as a sort of nickel back on the inside receiver when they were playing, just a little bit we saw. So. We got to see a little bit, maybe get a little bit of information, but it's still early in the spring.
Absolutely. Okay, how this show works is if you're new to it, obviously you can send us questions through on the right side of this bottom right side of your screen, send them to us directly, but you also can chat amongst yourselves, so to speak, and we'll pick off questions off the chat board as well. And certainly also you can, as we always say, click on our sponsors, and certainly those that have been very, very good to us over the years. Follett's Purdue Pride, and going to be a big announcement, really for us at least, a fun announcement. We think that Rob Hummel will be doing a signing with Rob Hummel with Follett's in conjunction with Jeff Julich and the gang there at the Purdue Pride store at the northeast side of Ross-Ade Stadium on the morning of the spring football game, 10:30 to 12:30, and that will be at a signing with Rob. And he's not selling a book, not yet. So he's just going to be there to sign photos and take pictures and all those kinds of things. So it's going to be a lot of fun with that. And that, of course, the same day as the Center for Cancer Research Purdue Challenge. And I know that both Stacy and Kyle are training up for that one. So I think Kyle's going to run sub-21 this. Sub-21 this. Well, you will run sub-21. You just may not be at the end of the race. So
I wish I could still run that fast, but that was about 15 or so years ago.
Yeah, and also
about 60 pounds ago.
State Farm agent Trent Johnson. Trent is myagent.com, and Trent, a longtime friend of the show. and the Hilton Garden Inn too. Obviously, at Hilton Garden Inn, the only Lafayette location is at Wabash Landing. When tomorrow's a big day, stay at HGI tonight, and the place we all wish we were going to dinner tonight, West Point Steakhouse, or at least myself, would be a good place to be going. And of course, it's just a short drive away from Mackey Arena in West Lafayette, and also Ross-Ade Stadium. Since Mackey Arena and Ross-Ade Stadium are right next to each other, it's a short drive away from both. So, Kyle, what also, you look ahead at spring ball and all the talk about 8 quarterbacks. I know that not all of them are in camp, but again, what are we learning? What are we learning from, if anything, at least from guys you've talked to in terms of, you had a chance to talk to Robert Marv a couple of weeks ago. We had a story on the site as well this week. Any sense for what you're seeing there?
Well, I don't know if things are going to shake themselves out anytime soon. I think Robert is excited to be back for his 6th year, and he feels like he's healthy really for the first time in a few years, or since the injury a couple years ago. So, I think an opportunity, for him to come in and maybe finally capitalize on some of the potential we've heard a lot about, but haven't really ever seen materialize on the field. I think ideally, even though nobody, well, I guess Danny Hope has said it a little bit, what they want to do is have either Turbush or Marv out there with Rob Henry out there as well, either as a hybrid Wildcat, I don't even know what to call it, a hybrid Wildcat type quarterback who's also out there, as a wide receiver, as a running back, or what have you. And maybe that works. We've sort of seen Danny try to do that a little bit a couple of years ago, and then probably 4 plays after it looked like they were going to start doing it, Robert got hurt. So, I think ideally that's sort of what they'd like to go to. Now, whether that guy ends up being Turbush or Marv, I think is the question that has to be decided. I think if you're just looking at it purely from a talent point of view, you go with Robert. But if you're looking for a guy who's going to do what you say every time out there, you might look more toward Caleb.
Well, and when we were there yesterday, Caleb was the one who was getting.
Yeah,
he was the first
which was
quarterback
a
on
little
the
bit of a
field.
surprise to me. I thought, I know it's still early in the spring, but I thought they already would have made a move toward Robert at this point. But
Yeah.
Maybe you disagree. I don't know, but I thought they would start to shuffle that direction.
Yeah, I mean, Danny says he wants one starting quarterback, and he wants to have it be the same guy every week. But I don't know how you can have Caleb be the starting quarterback and Marv and Henry still in the mix. It would seem like you have to pick 2 out of the 3, and you can't have all 3. So, I mean, that's obviously the talk of spring ball, and it's going to be the talk of camp, and it probably will be the talk of the whole next season until they get this figured out.
Well, and maybe it isn't. Maybe we're all, with Caleb Turbush, he's never varied for whatever reason. Everybody's talked throughout the course of, seems like through the course of time about, well, just how much longer is this going to go on? Almost
Right.
that sense now,
Yeah.
and then it's never changed. So in Danny's mind, I would guess, and that he says, well, he's just been our starting quarterback. What's
Yeah.
new and different? And I buy that line of logic. I just think though I tend to agree that maybe we're assuming things, and a dangerous thing to do, that it's eventually it's going to be Robert Marv and some hybrid of the Robert Marv Rob Henry show in some fashion. The one thing I think, as we talked about, is this team needs to find. I think we can all agree, and we've talked internally, this team has gotten a little bit of a bump in momentum, whether it's been the recruiting class, whether it's the fact that you win the Little Caesars Bowl, you get to 7 wins, you feel a little bit better about yourself as a football team. But also, this team needs to also create enough interest that it sells some tickets, and has the ability to have folks that are going to want to be in Ross-Ade Stadium next year. And I see some of that dynamic with having Henry and Marv and having offensive intrigue, so to speak, as being exciting, if it can work.
Well, I think they need to do something more exciting on
Yeah.
offense. I mean, I just think offensively last year, they just were pretty bland.
Yeah.
And maybe that's because your starting quarterback got injured in training camp, and you had to do some different things. And then Ralph at times looked pretty good, and other times, it looked like he was coming off the injury. But when I look at what they have offensively now, I think the quarterback situation will shake itself out. The question I have is, where are your playmakers? You have a few, but to me, there's only 3 wide receivers right now who you can say, okay, we can send these 3 guys out there, and you need more than that. I mean, they need Raheem Mostert to turn into a wide receiver. Some others that they really need step up into those roles, and I think it's a pretty critical time, in my opinion, for that.
Yeah,
Who's your third? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Who's your third receiver?
O.J. Ross,
Then who's the second?
Barry Bush.
Oh, okay. To me,
Did you
Bush
lose
is the
track?
third. No, to me, Bush is the third.
Well, I'm only saying O.J. Ross is the third because there's been
Because
some
of the situation,
cloudiness
yeah.
about his future. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, now you're going with Gary Bush is your number two, and I think Gary can be a good player. And he did step up a little bit when
He did.
O.J.
So
was
he
out
did.
last
Right.
year, and
Yep.
I think is getting better as a player. But
Yeah.
I think they need more people to emerge, and you really don't
Right.
have a big wide receiver. Even of those three, none of them
Yeah.
are. I guess Gary's probably 6 feet tall, maybe.
Maybe.
5'11",
Yeah.
but I wouldn't qualify him as a big physical receiver by any means.
And I think that's when then you can turn to the tight ends, potentially. I mean, all we've heard about how talented, Gabe Holmes is everybody keeps saying that. And obviously, he had injuries that really kind of set him back last year. And presumably, he didn't play to the potential that they've seen him play. So if he's healthy now, maybe he's the option. He's a bigger guy, and Crosby Wright really kind of came on and was a guy who made some big catches for them last year. So maybe it's almost like you have to turn maybe to a different spot to get some big catches. I mean, we just don't know. And then obviously we're not talking about the most important group, which is the offensive line, and we really have no idea who's going to play on the offensive line right now. I mean, really.
Yeah.
And we mentioned the injuries, and that's the biggest thing
Yeah.
this spring is those offensive linemen. I mean, they're talking about Robert Kugler, who just moved from tight end, being the number 2 center right now. And so maybe that's a testament to Kugler's ability.
Well,
But
yeah,
maybe it's a testament to a lack of depth also.
I just think that's what makes the spring here sort of interesting is that we have a lot of questions defensively because they have an almost entire new staff.
Right.
But when I look at things, to me, there are less questions defensively than there are offensively because you talk about, you talk about the receivers, you talk about, I think the offensive line is concerning because,
Yeah.
I mean, I know it gets spun as in, well, we can give these younger guys an opportunity now, but I think ideally you want all these guys to be healthy and build some continuity and be able to go out there and running back depth is a little bit of a concern. And, I don't know if you put quarterbacks as a concern, but certainly, you need to find some sort of system that works there. But I just think there are a lot of questions on that side of the ball.
And a question from Ted Anderson. We've had several questions, but wanting to ones that things that we haven't discussed. In terms of what are the players saying about the defensive coordinator and just style, the management style, I guess. Are you getting anything from the guys on that?
Yeah, from the guys I've interviewed, like Tim Tibesar. I don't know what else you would say at this point, really, but I think it's really his approach. As far as we're told he's a very hands-on guy and is really willing to teach. And then they just, I think, really like the style. It's supposed to be an attacking style of defense, and really what player doesn't want to play in kind of an attacking style of defense. So I think they're excited about what it could be, but still learning how to play it in that way that makes, So, and I know just speaking with, a couple of the linebackers as well, and Tibesar is obviously the linebackers coach, and they just really like that he was a player with kind of that attitude, of a linebacker kind of mentality, and they like that aspect of it too. Elmation last year had been around forever, obviously, and he taught those guys a lot of things, but this is a different approach, different techniques and just kind of a different attitude too. So I think they're still all learning how it's going to be and just getting used to these guys, but so far everything's been good. Of the athletes I've talked to.
You're looking at a question that we have on the board. Big Ten analyst, BTN analyst, Jerry DiNardo and Tom Dienhart on down the line have been very high on Purdue as a sleeper and think Ricardo Allen and Kawan Shorter are both the best returning at their position as starters. Do you share similar optimism defensively? And the D hasn't been its true strength to Purdue since 2004. I would say I'd argue 2003 on that. But guys, in terms of one of the things that's interesting is you start to look at the division that Purdue's in. If I had to be pressed, it is the leaders division, right? And I should.
Can you name all 6?
Yeah, I can name that. I just never. I have like a mental, the legends. I keep saying Michigan is a legendary program. That helps me remind me that Purdue maybe produced some Jacksonville
Now
to be a
you're
leader.
confusing me.
Yeah. So anyway,
going.
well, I got a mnemonic device. I don't know, mnemonic devices or whatever you want to use to be able to get through that. But Penn State, you know, the feeling is this year that that with its transition and all that has gone on in not so happy Valley here over the past several months, that you know, Purdue, there's some opportunity for Purdue. You know, this is more maybe more for time when we're looking at our football yearbook, but it does appear that Purdue, there may be some opportunities when you look at Illinois, Indiana, and Penn State that in Purdue's division, that there's some opportunities to move up.
I think opportunity is a good word. Sleeper is a good word. The problem I have is when people go from opportunity to sleeper and all of a sudden favorite.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, let's back off that a little bit. But I think, you know, that's a good way to put it. I think there are some other programs who you could say, you know, are going through some things, whether you want to call that rebuilding or, you know, sanctions or,
Yeah.
or you know, whatever you want to classify it at. I think Purdue has a chance to make a move up, but I think you would agree calling them out as the team to beat, I think, is a little bit of a stretch.
And I think it's too early to tell. But specifically with that defense part of that question,
Yeah.
like I said, I think it'll be interesting. I think we're all very eager to see what this is going to be, because they're absolutely, you know, Ricardo Allen and Quan Short absolutely are big-time players, but you need to have some help around them, I think. And so if Ryan Russell can really emerge and you get another defensive end who can emerge, it's going to take some pressure off Kawan, potentially up the middle where he doesn't get as many double teams. Or if he does, then you have Russell who can make plays on the edge. So I think there are a lot of interesting parts on the defense. So to see that come together and how that can play out is going to be an interesting storyline for sure.
Well, and they've talked a lot about being aggressive too, and you know, I think when Purdue was at its best in the late 90s to early aughts, they were an aggressive, you know, get after it kind of defense, and maybe it was personnel that kept them from doing that over the last 6 or 7 years or whatever, and they felt like they had to, you know, play to not give up the big play, which was true in some respects. But if they could get back to being, you know, a swarm to the ball, aggressive, get after the quarterback type defense, I think that would be a positive step, to say the least.
Yeah.
Swarming is apparently the motto. That's what I was told.
That's
Swarming,
always a good thing.
Swarming is the motto.
One of the
Swarm to
things,
ball.
as
That's what I've heard.
That's a good way to
That's
do
what
it.
I was told yesterday. You said swarming,
No,
it made
I-
me think of it. Swarming is the motto. I
As
can't remember who
viewers
told
of
me
this
that.
show, I do you know, we do have archive versions, and you need to go back and watch Tim Tibasar's interview
is good.
Yeah, he
from
was
3 or
really
4
good.
weeks ago. Very impressive, and I'm trying not to. I'm not gushing. I'm just trying to look at this. He just left a very favorable impression with me, just in terms of being not only articulate and obviously his academic credentials. He's a cerebral guy. I don't want to have to go toe to toe with him on that, but he's very, very capable. But I thought he had an intensity level that leaves you at least where he might be right now with these players in terms of just the kind of the get introduced phase. You know, he's going to leave a positive impression with him, it appears.
In all honesty, though, anybody sitting next to us is going to look like a genius, aren't they?
Yeah, that may be true. Except for Stacy, she already is. So that
But
part.
no,
is
I think that you know, I thought he was impressive, and from an intensity point of view, you know, I think he's going to bring that to the table.
Yeah. We have some questions also that we're going to let Brian and Larry try to tackle. Let's switch to women's basketball. We had a question from a guest about any information on women's basketball recruiting for 2013, and both of you guys have been involved with women's basketball. But Kyle, anything new and different, or
Not much new, I don't think, but I mean, a couple players to keep an eye on who have been around the program quite frequently here. You know, is Ebony Henderson, if I'm saying her. Emily Henderson.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to say
if
that
I'm saying
first
her name right, from around the St. Louis area, who's
Can't miss
you know,
her.
yeah, she's a physical, very physical
Specimen.
power forward type
Person.
He's legit.
She's legit, it seems like. And Stephanie Mafunga from down in Brownsburg,
Yeah.
who's been around a lot and is a big center, obviously, you know, who's pretty familiar with Purdue. And, you know, I think that those two are, you know, possibly ones who could do something in the near future. With Mafunga, I'm not sure that, you know, she's got a lot of other possibilities out there, and I'm not saying she's certainly in Purdue's pocket or anything, but, you know, a couple of players that have been around the program quite a bit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how and how, if anybody, and certainly we're going to talk a little bit about who the men might be looking at down the stretch here, and a possible spring signee for Matt Painter's crew. All right, we're going to shoo you guys off and bring in the B team or the C team or the C and N team, I guess, with Clisby and Newbert for segment 2. Hang loose. It was really a good first segment, but it may even get better or it may get worse. We don't know, but we'll look forward to. That's a great way to make you stick around. But we'll look forward to bringing Larry and Brian on for segment 2. Watch those commercials. Go get yourself a can of soda, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple minutes on Gold and Black Live.
Just one night. One team victorious. The story behind the score. The rivalries. The big plays. From the sidelines to you. On the air, online. Are you ready for the frenzy? Friday Night Frenzy. High school football from where you live.
Check out the Purdue collection now at Follett's. Boiler up with Nike Fantastic T-shirts, League and Champion fashion colors. Simply fabulous, simply Follett's. Purdue pride everywhere on game day. Nike sideline, worn by the team, by the players, and by you. And make every day game day with tailgate toss. Follett's, Purdue pride, a Purdue tradition, 17 game day locations.
West Point Steakhouse is a family-owned restaurant known for premium quality steaks. Open for dinner Thursday through Saturday. Stop by for the Thursday night prime rib special or Friday and Saturday night specials like pasta and seafood. Be sure to come and enjoy all the food and fun at West Point Steakhouse.
You can now get a quote or buy car insurance 24 hours a day. Call me, State Farm Agent Trent Johnson, at 743-9595 and see how much money you can save today.
Going to the Purdue game? Stay at Hilton Garden Inn, West Lafayette at the Wabash Landing. Your family will love the well-appointed guest rooms, the pool, whirlpool, fitness center, the breakfast buffet, and the amazing Hilton Garden Inn staff. Located just 4 blocks from Purdue University, Hilton Garden Inn has long been the choice for Purdue fans. Call today for a reservation and make Hilton Garden Inn your #1 choice.
When you see it happen, report it. Send us your news stories, photos, and videos with our Report It feature. It's easy with WLFI.com and the WLFI smartphone app. With a few simple clicks, you can send videos and photos of breaking news coverage. See your submissions on air as part of our broadcast or online in the Report It gallery. WLFI.com. Always mobile, always connected.
Segment 2, Gold and Black Live. We're trying to solve and digest life's issues from time to time, and isn't it good that we have basketball to talk about? Yes.
Oh, I don't know. After last week, I don't know.
Yeah,
we can talk about something else. If you
Yeah, I
want.
know that.
Better than having nothing to talk
Hey, you
about.
want to talk about the presidential race? We can go that
Yeah,
way.
we'll talk about that anytime. But
I don't think we want to alienate our audience.
Larry Clisby joins us, and Brian Newbert. You've seen that face before, and
Unfortunately.
we're back for a couple segments to talk Purdue hoops, and of course, Larry, you have a game like last week. We've seen Purdue in that position before. We've seen Purdue come through in that position before. Still, how do you take the end of that game and the effort against Kansas?
Well, I'm like any other fan. It was an excruciating way to leave the tournament, and the first night I didn't sleep. Second night I woke up after about 2 hours and started thinking about it again. So one of the things about when you announce a ball game, you lay down an imprint in your mind, and it's amazing. There's a lot of things you don't forget. You see it over and over and over again. And I mean, you guys know I've been part of this thing for a long, long time, and I take it personal, and so I took it personal. So it was, and my wife always tells me it's not about me, it's about the players and the coaches, and quit feeling sorry for yourself and move on with your life and quit being a big baby. And so, so it takes me a week. So to this point, it was a terrific effort, and I just wonder what the impact would have been, because you were in a position to have one of the major upsets of the tournament, and you would have made a Sweet 16. And I go back, fellas, to 4 games this year. I go back to the Xavier game, the Butler game, the Michigan game at home, and the Kansas game. And you're up Xavier by 19 with 10 minutes to go and lose. You have Butler down 15 first half and lose at the buzzer.
Yep.
You have Michigan down 4 late in the game and lose, and with a chance to win it on a Hummel shot. And then and then this game. And if you flip all those games, and let's say you're 4-0, then you're 26-9. You're in the Sweet 16, and you're one of the most amazing stories of the entire college basketball season. Seriously. And on top of that, think how incredible this is. You still would have been 0-7 against the Big Ten teams who were ahead of you. So you would have been 26-2 against everybody else. See what I mean? So it was agonizingly close to a tremendous season.
Right. I'll throw 2 other games in there too. The Wisconsin loss at home, the Indiana loss at home. Those were both games that were close in the final minutes that historically in Mackey Arena we've always seen Purdue win, and they weren't able to get it done this year. Now, it's my personal opinion that if Robbie Hummel and Lewis Jackson are practicing all season long and thus playing perhaps early in the year like they were late in the year, this is a team that wins at least 5 or 6 more games, is certainly doesn't lose 4 home games during the Big Ten season. And as you just said, we're talking about a 25-26 win team, and all of a sudden Purdue loses 2 NBA guys, brings back its best player off 2 ACL surgeries, and wins 25 or 26 games. You're talking about maybe the story of the college basketball world, but here we are with the what if stuff again. Every year with Purdue basketball, it's like, what if this hadn't happened? What if that hadn't happened? But that's just kind of the way it goes.
But that's part of our fan DNA, though. Now, I mean, that's basically part of your DNA. What if?
Well, your first year.
Also, I mean, it's fact though too. I mean, they've been so close to so much that if one little thing, I shouldn't call Robbie Hummel getting hurt little. No. That was obviously significant. It's my personal opinion that Robbie Hummel getting hurt at Minnesota cost them a Final Four.
Mine too.
Him getting re-injured the next year might have cost them a Final Four. Obviously, we don't know how things would have played out after those injuries, but those were 2 Final Four teams that just didn't go to a Final Four because the 2007 class that completely changed this program, or went a long way in changing this program, just got its prime taken away from it. Those were the 2 years Purdue built toward, and its prime just got taken away from it by circumstance. And if they do go to that Final Four that year, we don't know if they would. It's my personal opinion, obviously Larry's personal opinion, they would have. That changes so much probably.
Well, it could have been a lot like the Florida deal. It really could have been back-to-back deals. And we talk about getting in the Final Four. It could have been it could have been like the Butler thing, played in 2 national championships, could have won 2. Who knows? But I think certainly the first year, I was thinking about this the other night, with the Kramer and Lou and the Robbie and each one and Juwan. I like that lineup against whoever we've seen this tournament, with the exception of Kentucky now.
Yeah.
Still, Kentucky. Still, Kentucky to me looks pretty good, but still, you know, against Kansas, I would take that lineup any day the other night.
Yeah, I think in 2000, you took back to February 24th, 2010. Is that right? And that was as good a basketball team as I've seen at Purdue in a long time. I mean, you know, even Glenn in '94, you know, that team had some things that it had Glenn, sure, but it didn't have some things inside. This team seemed to at that point have everything.
Oh, it had everything. I mean, they had everything. I mean, I always remember that at Minnesota Williams Arena, because when he's coming in from the left wing there and went down, I mean, we're up 12 or 14 at that time in the first half, and just really and they weren't bad. I mean, we were just slicing and dicing them up.
One thing to take into account also with that team, and you know, we're running the risk here of talking too much about 2 years ago, as opposed to what happened last weekend. But that team, after Lewis Jackson came back from injury and before Robbie Hummel got hurt, they only got to play that team in its full form only got to play 7 games together. In those 7 games, Purdue was 7-0. They beat number 13 Wisconsin at home, and they beat 2 top 10 teams on the road. I think Michigan State was in the top 10, or if not, they were in the number 11 or something like that. Ohio State was in the top 10. They won at Michigan State, and they won at Ohio State. So that team was absolutely rolling. They were 22-3. I think at the time, Lewis Jackson, they were 22-3 at the time Hummel got hurt, I believe. Right. And they'd won however many games in a row it was, but in their full form with Lewis Jackson and Robbie Hummel, they were 7-0.
All right, well, we have lots of questions. When you have Larry on here, he's a lightning rod, which is good. But talk about, and you're obviously, nobody's closer to this basketball program really than you are, and not to ask, and we're not asking you to divulge deep, dark secrets, but certainly Matt Painter and the job that he's done. And the question from Boiler Up says, everybody looks for someone to blame, and the knuckleheads go nuts. Those on our fine boards. Can you let everyone know what a great leader Purdue has in Matt Painter, and the way he does things? Tell us what your observations of and Brian has been publicly has talked about the job that Matt Painter did this year. But there were obviously, outside of the obvious challenges, this was not an easy season to be a basketball coach.
Well, first off, for any of you who want to know, and I've blogged about this before, but I read the knuckleheads every day. So, I'm a regular reader, and so I'm well aware of the comments, good and bad and indifferent, that that this very small part of our fan base is, letting us address us every day. And so, I hear some of them, and I see others that I, probably shake my head. But here's the deal, I'm no longer a journalist. I'm pretty much Purdue's play-by-play announcer, and I'm all out of this other game. I'm kind of retired from it, so I try to, I try to be real careful what my comments will be. So it's a little unfair to have me say this, because Matt and his entire staff have been so good to me and have treated me so well, so respectful, and I have that same feeling for them. We have access that is unparalleled in college sports. I mean, unparalleled. I don't think anybody in the country has the access that Rob and I, and even our engineer Wes Scott, has, and so we value it and obviously protect it. But I think he's a tremendous young coach, and I think people have got to put in perspective. He's 41 years old. He has coached 8 years. He was 25-5 at SIU. He had a rebuilding year here at 9-19. He's come back and averaged 25 wins a season. We just documented if a few things would have gone differently, we could have won 25 games this year. Could have been a Sweet 16 team, and not for those injuries, and certainly the one to Robbie, I think we would have even done better. But I think he's a tremendous coach. I think our future is extremely bright, and I'm one of his biggest fans.
Yeah, and even
I don't have anything at stake here, and I would agree. He's pretty good. Yeah. Purdue was at one point 15-9 this season, headed the NIT. I think Robbie Hummel gets a hell of a lot of credit for that, obviously, for getting Purdue in the NCAA tournament, because he became Robbie Hummel again at the perfect time. Yes. And played probably the best basketball of his career when Purdue needed him to the most, just to get it back to the NCAA tournament. But that was obviously a team kind of I don't want to say on the brink to hampering the natural association with another program, but that was very much a team on the brink, sitting at 15-9, going to the NIT, probably. And I think you also have to give the coach a lot of credit for that. In addition to the players get the credit, but you have to credit the coach also.
And his staff. And his
yeah,
staff.
all
He
his
has
staff.
good staff.
But there were a lot of instances this season where this season could have gone completely south.
Yeah.
They dealt with a lot of adversity, overcame all of it.
Yeah, and in my view, looking at it, and I think one of the things that gets forgotten by those that were some of the comments, and I will say, even though we run this little business, that a lot of the comments that even get made in our message boards, or sometimes by fans, can be from the 2%. But you know, the whole notion of Purdue playing conservatively, playing to lose, which I just found absolutely laughable. Did anybody stop and think that again, Rob Hummel was not 100%, and you know, he was whatever percent he was 70%. He was of what he was. I mean, he did a terrific job, but you have to people forget that, and not to mention the fact that you forget that you're playing Kansas, not a bad basketball team. They didn't absolutely have a great day that day, but then also Lewis Jackson, who made so many plays, of course, this year. Never complained about his health, or all you have to do is go back a month and realize what that kid was going through physically, and the job that those guys did to pull this team forward was, I think, as impressive a job as I've seen, and yet it won't go down as that, because you finish 22-13, and you finish a point shy of, or 3 points shy of beating Kansas. So I think that'll be enough for the Matt Painter fan club, but it could go on for a while here. Larry, a question for you on DJ Bird and Tyrone, and I'll ask Brian this as well. In terms of, there's two guys where the light seemed to kind of go on for those guys. Certainly on February 7th for DJ, though he had shot the ball better in Big Ten play leading up to that game at Ohio State, but he just all of a sudden went to another level. Tyrone Johnson may have come on even a little bit later than that, but all of a sudden became the player that Brian Neward had been telling us about all those years, and yet. Was there a particular moment where you saw this, or you just thought this is a natural maturity of two guys, or did DJ just start making shots?
Well, you know, if you go to enough practices and you see some of these guys do some of these things, then when it happens in a game, you're not like off the chart surprised. Yeah. Now I was off the chart surprised by Sunday's play against Kansas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I really was. I thought, you know, he ended up with 21 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
22 minutes and had 6 boards, and I thought he played confidently, and that surprised me. Yeah. I'm real happy for him, but I'm just saying that kind of surprised me. But Tyrone and DJ has always had the ability, and you know, both of them again injured. You had Tyrone coming off the meniscus surgery, and he got, you know, a little bit out of shape, and it took him a while to work back in. And with Kelsey having a lot of his minutes, you know, that when he left, you know, he got a lot of those minutes. Then the other thing is that the same thing with DJ, if you remember, he had that ankle injury early, and that really sidelined him for a long time until he could get his confidence back. And the same thing happens with the coaching staff. You're not playing well and you're hurt. I'm going with someone else, and you start giving them minutes, and before you know it, DJ's way back there at the end of the bench, and he's not getting the time. Then all of a sudden, boom, he's earned the time. He gets out on the court, and he made it work. So. I like his future. I had a nice talk with him, you know, the night that game ended, and I think he'll come back and really be ready to play and give us a chance to stretch the floor. And Tyrone is really good now. Yeah. And I think he'll, you know, I think he's got it, and I think he'll work on his game. But neither one of them are going to be big-time players unless they work on it. And the one thing I like about this year, you know, we have the new 2-hour rule, which is really going to help. And also the fact that Purdue has a European trip this year, which means all these guys can come in, they all can get individual instruction, we'll get an extra week of practice, we'll get 2 weeks in Europe before we even start practice. Right. So that's going to help this team a lot, in my opinion.
And Brian, and I would not be being facetious, or not overtly facetious about Tyrone, but you obviously have seen him play long time, and you've seen it. But what did anything change from your perspective, or just success start to happen for him?
I think when Kelsey Barlow happened, for one thing, it kind of empowered Tyrone Johnson a little bit. Sometimes guys have to step up when an opportunity presents itself. If Robbie Hummel doesn't miss the Ohio State game his sophomore year, you know, Juwan Johnson doesn't score 30 points in that game, who knows where Juwan Johnson goes from there. 2, they obviously found something from a matchups perspective. Early in the Big Ten season, they went to the small lineups. It really got their offense going. And a big part of Tyrone Johnson's success at the end of the season was the fact that Purdue had so many shooters on the floor. It spread the floor out, and teams couldn't put their 5-man on Robbie Hummel because there's no way they could guard him, so they had to put their 5-man on somebody. So I suppose that they were just choosing the guy they considered the least of the three-point threats. So they put their 5-man on Tyrone Johnson, and Tyrone Johnson just absolutely ate them alive, taking the ball to the basket. That was a big part of it. The other big part of it was both off seasons prior to Tyrone Johnson's first 2 seasons at Purdue, he's had some sort of injury to deal with, and he hasn't been able to get a lot of shots up. He hasn't come into preseason practice in the best shape because he's been recovering from, I think he had a shoulder problem one year, he had knee surgery last year. So I think it just took him a while this season to kind of get into game shape and sort of play himself into a rhythm.
Okay, we're gonna take a short break, catch our breath. I would say one thing about Bill Self even said yesterday, I heard on ESPN about the fact that he was so glad that he was playing against NC State tonight and he didn't have to have Robinson guard a 2-guard. So I mean, Purdue's small lineup has caused some problems, some matchup issues for folks. And yet we'll talk with whether anybody can stand to watch the NC State-Kansas game tonight, and whether that's always a hard thing for Purdue fans to do after a loss. So we'll be back in a couple minutes. Stay tuned for more on Gold and Black Live.
Just one night. One team victorious. The story behind the score. The rivalries. The big plays. From the sidelines to you. On the air, online. Are you ready for the frenzy? Friday Night Frenzy. High school football from where you live.
Check out the Purdue collection now at Follett's. Boiler up with Nike Fantastic T-shirts. League and champion fashion colors. Simply fabulous, simply Follett's. Purdue pride everywhere on game day. Nike sideline, worn by the team, by the players, and by you. And make every day game day with tailgate toss. Follett's, Purdue pride, a Purdue tradition, 17 game day locations.
West Point Steakhouse is a family-owned restaurant known for premium quality steaks. Open for dinner Thursday through Saturday. Stop by for the Thursday night prime rib special or Friday and Saturday night specials like pasta and seafood. Be sure to come and enjoy all the food and fun at West Point Steakhouse.
You can now get a quote or buy car insurance 24 hours a day. Call me, State Farm Agent Trent Johnson, at 743-9595 and see how much money you can save today.
Going to the Purdue game? Stay at Hilton Garden Inn, West Lafayette at the Wabash Landing. Your family will love the well-appointed guest rooms, the pool, whirlpool, fitness center, the breakfast buffet, and the amazing Hilton Garden Inn staff. Located just 4 blocks from Purdue University, Hilton Garden Inn has long been the choice for Purdue fans. Call today for a reservation and make Hilton Garden Inn your #1 choice.
When you see it happen, report it. Send us your news stories, photos, and videos with our Report It feature. It's easy with WLFI.com and the WLFI smartphone app. With a few simple clicks, you can send videos and photos of breaking news coverage. See your submissions on air as part of our broadcast or online in the Report It gallery. WLFI.com. Always mobile, always connected.
Segment 3, Gold and Black Live, and Larry Clisby and Brian Newbert with me, and we're looking forward to hashing out another. We're not going to solve anything in these last 17, 18 minutes, but we'll try our best still the same. But thank you to our sponsors, certainly Hilton Garden Inn, State Farm Agent Trent Johnson, and of course Follett's and Purdue Pride, and of course they'll be hosting the Robbie Hummel signing with us on April the 14th. I mean, from 10:30 to 12:30. I mean, the hardest time, Stacy can attest to this, but the dates April 13th and April 20th. I can't get them straight. I'll work on that in the off season, and then of course too, West Point Steakhouse and Hilton Garden, our sponsor. So we were talking off air, and Brian, you had another comment about looking back at the Kansas game, and one of the things that all fans sometimes, not all, they almost always forget to do, that you were playing against a pretty good basketball team in Kansas. They weren't exactly, as they say, chopped liver. This was a team in the Purdue, and your point being that,
right.
Talk about your statistical point about how Purdue shot in the second half.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just, the point I wanted to make was just that I know there was a lot of talk out there that Purdue rolled up in a ball in the last minute and handed the game away, which I completely understand, because the game was lost in the final minutes. But Purdue shot 24% in the second half. They didn't shoot 24% in the final minute. So that has a lot to do with Kansas. Obviously Purdue was red hot offensively in the first half. Kansas solved it. They went to that triangle and 2, or that box and 1, whatever defense they ran. They were able to stay with Hummel and kind of curb his productivity a little bit. Purdue, just the whole second half, they struggled to get shots. So it was unfortunate in the final minute, Kansas, after they had to fight for everything they got to that point, got 3 easy baskets off of it. It's unfortunate Lewis Jackson tried to turn the corner, had to dribble back out and turn the ball over, but that has something to do with the fact that Kansas has a 7-footer and a 6'10" guy around the rim too. When you're a 5'9" point guard, it's not as easy as just going up and laying the ball in.
I will say this though, it is amazing to have 3 runouts though, when you had only 2 previous in the entire game. Yeah. And the ball, the way it bounced, was incredibly fortunate in favor of Kansas. Now, we knew, and I saw a lot of video before the game, they have a tendency to try to create runouts by what we call in the basketball vernacular as cherry picking. Yeah. Elijah Johnson on the alley-oop, he did exactly that, where he took off, but the ball came their way on 2 occasions. And then on the last occasion, when Hummel, which was right in front of me, Hummel takes the shot and misses it, and as everyone's going for the rebound, that ball's bouncing up in the air, and Connor Tehan just basically slaps it, and the ball, just immediately heads for Tyshawn Collins or Taylor, and boom! It was just amazing how 3 times in 1 minute and 10 seconds or whatever it was that the ball did bounce their way. Now you got to give them credit for being there.
Right. I think one of the Kansas writers even broke down that, sequence frame by frame, and his whole thing was Tyshawn Taylor just didn't block anybody out on the rebound like he presumably should have. So he went. Yeah, he just went right down the floor, and that's fine. So what if that ball goes right to Tyrone Johnson, who was not blocked out? It's a layup and Purdue wins. So we always talk about basketball being kind of a game of inches and a game of just sheer dumb luck, and there you go.
All right, 2012-13. Obviously, we had a question about. And Brian, again, on the recruiting side, but these kids that are coming in and how this team will blend together next year. I'll let you start with it, Larry, in terms of you have a good nucleus certainly coming back, the guys we've all been talking about, and one guy we haven't talked about is Anthony Johnson or Donnie Hale, but certainly Anthony made some steps in the right direction too and showed some signs of being there. But this is not a team that's going to fall off the face of the earth next year.
Well, what I did notice at the end of the year was, and from the time that Kelsey was taken out of the program, was this. We did play well. I mean, we played really well against Ohio State for 33, 34 minutes. As you know, we had a chance to tie the game with 7 minutes to go. Then in the NCAA, we competed against 2 really good teams. And I felt a confidence level that I hadn't seen earlier in the year. I can tell you this for anybody who wants to hear, I'm not a shoot-around guy that goes to practice and takes anything out of it. I normally watch shoot around, and if you're the greatest shoot around team in history, it doesn't make a difference because you still have to go play. But I will say that on Sunday, Rob Blackman, my guy that works with us, we couldn't help talk about it. We went to pregame, and he said to me, "Did you see what happened today?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, we weren't missing. Everybody was focused." and you could see a confidence level that I really hadn't seen all year, and it paid off. I mean, those guys played well. And what I'm saying is, I felt after the game, there's a lot of devastated people after that game, as Brian knows, but there's a feeling. There's a feeling there from guys like Anthony Johnson, from DJ Bird, from Sonny Margic, from Teron Johnson. All these guys, you could feel it, you could see it. They can't wait to come back, and I love that because we did not have that last year. When we came off that loss to VCU, it was like, season's over, see ya. You know what I'm saying? It was not a good ending last year for such a talented team. This team, I think, is ready to go. And I talked to Donnie Hale. Donnie's looking forward to playing.
Yeah.
You know, he's gonna be 21 years old. He's finally gonna get to play. So I think with the change, as Brian mentioned earlier about the changes that we're gonna have this summer, I like the fact that everybody will be able to come in and get acquainted with each other, and we'll see what happens. But I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, let's hit that again. You talked about obviously the team's going to Italy, but the 2-hour rule and the change there again.
What happened was, historically, NCAA coaches have always wanted the NCAA to implement some sort of coaching contact for them to have with their players in the summer. It's always been the only person who can work, the only coaches or staff members who can work hands-on with players in the offseason has been the strength coaches. Now, the NCAA has, I guess, kind of listened to their coaches and given a 2-hour allowance per week during the summer. So coaches can either, I guess they can either have 1 2-hour practice, they can break up those 2 hours into 3 40-minute segments or 2 1-hour segments. So what's going to happen this summer is Purdue's coaches and coaches everywhere are going to be able to actually have workouts or practices with their players in the summer. Also, Purdue going on this exhibition tour overseas in August. They're going to get 10 practices leading up to that, and then however many actual games they're going to play over in Italy. So with Purdue being such a young team next year, I think they only have a couple of scholarship upperclassmen. They have a very small senior class next year. That's going to be really helpful. I mean, it's really lined up well for them. Their schedule is going to be very difficult next year in the non-conference, too. So if there's ever a time for that a young team can really hit the ground running, this might be it, because they're going to get so much work in advance of the season.
Are you traveling with them? Have you got that figured out yet?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, you got to go.
I don't know that.
You got to go.
We'll help you, Ray. Gold and Black, well, you could be our correspondent.
I did go to Australia.
And you were great on those midnight or 3 a.m. phone calls where you called us back.
That was a fun trip.
Yeah, and it's a fun time to be a part of the group to be able to do that.
And I didn't know that we'd end up playing like half of Australia in a college.
Yeah, I know. Who ever would have known?
Yeah, what an unbelievable story there.
Dellavedova's a heck of a player.
He is. He's pretty good. And so is Rob Jones.
Yeah, and the fact that game too, the St. Mary's game, it's funny because again that other comment, well, Purdue doesn't ever win games close or has a hard time finishing, and there was a game again very similar to the Kansas game where Purdue led the very vast majority of the game, almost let it go, but was able to get it back. We'd be feeling a lot different.
Hey, it was our MO this year. It's our MO, but previous 3-4 seasons we won a lot of close games, a lot of big games on the road, and just the way it is. That was the nature of this team, I think.
Talking about, and Brian, obviously, with who's coming in, and you talk about Rayfel Davis and certainly Ronnie Johnson, Jay Simpson, and the ability to bring a group in that's going to be able to get a chance to play, and obviously A.J. Hammonds too, but to have a chance to play right away. Have you both comment just on the dynamic of the team in terms of what needs to happen for those guys to come in and do the job, just in terms of skill level, but also their ability to assimilate themselves into this group that's remaining.
I think they just have to come in understanding what's expected of them to be able to have success at this level right away. They're inevitably going to be compared to the 2007 class, which isn't going to be fair, but.
Well,
that was the last time.
Turned out to be better.
That was the last time, though, Purdue had to play so many freshmen in the same season. But that was a special class. I mean, that was a group that was just pretty much mature beyond its years. Obviously, very, very talented. I don't think you can ever expect that to kind of repeat itself. It's always a crapshoot with freshmen because you don't know yet what they're made of from an emotional standpoint, from a mental, cognitive standpoint. You don't know how they're gonna adjust to the demands of college basketball right away. You don't know what kind of shape they're going to come in. You don't know how quickly they're going to learn. You don't know if they're going to be scared the first time they go out there. There's all sorts of variables with freshmen. So I really don't know if we can even expect anything from this team going into next season, just because there's going to be so many guys that haven't played yet. You know, they're going to play, those 4 freshmen are going to have to play. Obviously, Donnie Hale hasn't played in a game yet. He's going to have to play. They aren't done recruiting either. It's entirely possible you could have 1 or 2 new guys added here in the spring. So this is going to be as different a team as we will have seen since that 2007 team that was really young. One thing Purdue's really had going for it the past couple of years, maybe not so much this year, was continuity. You know, it seemed like Purdue put the same team on the floor there for a couple of years, 3 or 4 years in a row. Now, obviously, Juwan Johnson, E'Twaun Moore were gone this year, but you at least still had the familiarity of Hummel, Jackson, and Ryan Smith. Now, it's entirely possible that DJ Bird might be your only scholarship senior next year, depending on whether John Hart decides to come back. So this is going to be a really, really young team, so who knows?
But I do think it'll be a great challenge for the coaching staff, and I think they're looking forward to having something different. I mean, they're going to change the way they do some things.
Yep.
And we're going to have some guys, you know, on this team that at least when we're going through those airports, they're going to take notice of us.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to talk too much about playing small. And the other thing I want to comment real quickly on is that there's 3 kids that are coming in who, in my opinion, will have a great deal to say about the future of Purdue basketball. It's Ronnie Johnson, Raphael Davis, and then in the next year, Bryson Scott. Those 3 kids are all incredibly tough-minded, and I really like that. I think you know, you talk about Ronnie's going to have to play, and he is, and I think from day one is going to be Purdue's point guard, and Matt's going to have that dynamic with him. But I think but those guys really, and Raphael, everything I've heard from him and from the coaches that is contact with him, he thinks he's going to play.
Yeah.
I mean, he thinks he's going to start.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really good to look at some of these guards that are in front of him and say, hey, you're not going to keep me out of the lineup. And I love that attitude, and I think we can have some of that. I really do. I think some toughness would really help this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing they also have to, just from an on-paper standpoint, they have to get a little more athletic, and it would be help if they could be a little longer in terms of their bodies. I think this class is going to go a long way in helping that also, as will bringing Donnie Hale into the mix.
And we can
he's very athletic.
And we can see if they can play defense again, which will certainly
which
of course will be their challenge.
Yeah. Well, and that'll be the fun part of watching them do. I think from a coaching standpoint.
Yeah, just one of the interesting things about this season is Purdue, just to kind of get through the year, one thing Matt Painter had to do was sort of back off some of his core principles defensively. You know, especially after Kelsey Barlow left, you saw them back off their full court pressure. That was a product, at least in some part, of Lewis Jackson, you know, being hurt throughout the year. Next year, he's going to want to get back to the way Purdue has always played. So that's something that these incoming kids are really going to play a heavy hand in.
And you're answering all the questions because somebody asked about what things could they do differently, and I think you're right. Defensively, they could look a lot different if they can play. And that's the other thing. That's you talked about.
Oh yeah, you
talk about the freshmen coming in, and
right.
and that's the wild card. Not only we know they can do things offensively. We know that some of them can do some things defensively, but it's boot camp. I mean, they got to get through basic training to some extent.
Well, I've been watching Louisville last couple games, and you know, is it Chang? Is that how you say his last name?
Chain Behan.
And the center. But anyway, the way a guy like that can change a game by not scoring the basketball is incredible. You put him in the middle and let him block everything that comes your way, and you know, hopefully with some height and with some blocking shot ability that we may get from Hammonds, if he's capable of doing that.
And Hale.
And Donnie would be great, you know, because now you've changed the dynamic of the game and you can play more perimeter-oriented defense.
All right, this conversation could go on a lot longer. Larry's got some business to conduct, or we could go on for another hour. I'm just kidding. It is time for us
I'm retired.
To leave. We're all talking about Social Security. I qualified for AARP this year, and Larry is on Social Security, so he says. Brian, you got a long way to go, my friend.
I'm just trying to get there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's exactly.
You got to have the weight, babes.
We're all doing that. So, all right, we want to thank our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, of course, Follett's and Purdue Pride, and West Point Steakhouse. Now, a programming note. We will have a show not for the next 2 weeks, but in 3 weeks. Robbie Hummel will be our guest, April the 13th. That should be a lot of fun to talk to Rob about not only his past, but certainly his future and all he's meant to the Purdue program. And then the following week, we have scheduled our last show of the year, April 20th. Coach Danny Hope, we think, will join us for a record 7th time, but we are glad to have the coach with us. And we'll also maybe have some other special guests that day as well. We'll talk spring football, and we'll always talk something near and dear to everyone's heart, and that's Boilermaker basketball. So, again, thanks, guys, so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 3 weeks on Gold and Black Live.